Right, okay, guys, welcome to episode 15, I think it is, of the Nice and Nasty podcast. Now, this is this. I'm actually really looking forward I know I see that every time. I feel a bit like these guys when they're playing a gig. They go, "It's great to be here in Glasgow." No, but it's. I've been looking forward to this one, Paul, for obvious reasons. Apart from that, you're a lovely, a guy with fantastic charisma and what have you.
Alan,
obviously,
if you wanted to ask me on a date, Alan, just ask me. You don't have to invite me on the show and make all this pretense. Take me for dinner and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, you're normally sat on my side of the fence. You're normally the guy that does these interviews. In fact, I'm trying to actually think of how I first got to know you. It probably was. I obviously saw you. It might have been Grindr, actually. It might have been until you blocked me. Yeah, I mean, I think you were doing these Play Blackpool gigs, and then obviously you tied up with Tony Temple. So what was your kind of introduction to like video games and getting into the whole kind of interviewing lark? How did that come about?
Right. I mean, those are two separate questions I'd like to point out. So do you mean, so obviously I grew up with video games. You want to say at what point did I actually go from playing them to writing about them? Have I understood the question right? Okay. Yeah, I'll tell you that very clearly. Is that like so many of us, video games were a fundamental part of your growing up. But then I think to be nostalgic about anything, you've got to have some time away. So I went, in the late 80s, I went to university and I got into, some studying, mainly drinking and drugs and girls, all the fun stuff. So I didn't really play video games while I was at university. And then when I came back in my early 20s and I was training to be a teacher, it was one of those eureka moments, Al, is that I was in Derby Market, glamorous, and there was an Atari 2600 or VCS, as we used to know, and it was £10, I think it was. And I remember really vividly that in 1978 or 9, I really wanted one of those for Christmas, but they were £200, which was so it was suddenly like, oh my God, you can buy part of your childhood. And I found that magical. And ever since then, never looked back. Through the 90s, so you started seeing there was a bit of a retro scene. And fanzines, in fact, that's how I first started. A fanzine called Retro Classics, spelt with an X, but don't judge him on that. By a lovely old bloke who I once actually went to meet once. So I ended up writing for a fanzine, and the first person, I'm trying to remember the first person we ever interviewed. Yeah, it was. God, isn't this terrible? You should always remember your first time, shouldn't you? It was, I got in touch with Scott. That was it. I got in touch with Scott Adams.
Wow.
And he replied. And it was, I remember because you could get his email. I mean, to be fair, even email in sort of 1997 and 8, even email was slightly weird, wasn't it? Right?
Yeah.
And I remember finding his email him, and he replied. And it was like saying a prayer and God answering. It was very hard. It's hard to describe to people now how I talked to my mates Ian and John. I used to meet on a Friday in the pub, and they said you should try and contact him. Like, well, don't be so stupid, right? And when he replied, and not only that, said, "Yeah, I'll answer your questions." And I was just, again, it's very hard to explain to people how starstruck I was, because this was someone who was making something that defined my childhood, those early adventure games.
Yeah.
I can still see the castle in The Count. I can still see the bear in Adventureland so vividly. And this guy was replying to you and seemed genuinely kind of chuffed that someone was interested. So I wrote an article for a fanzine, and then it kind of went from there. I've rambled enough. Kind of went from there.
Yeah, so was that kind of before the internet? So was this fanzine physical paper, or was it actually, it was a physical paper thing?
It was, I've still got it beautifully, obviously photocopied on his works photocopier and then stapled together. And I once went to visit him, actually, and he turned
Scott Adams.
Not Scott. I have met him, but no, the guy that was editing the fanzine. Right. He just worked in a flower shop, but downstairs in the basement, he had loads of retro stuff. God, I can't remember his name. Malcolm, I think his name was. But anyway, it was just, so it was a physical fanzine. I've still got it in the attic. And then from doing that, it gave me enough confidence to start writing for my local paper, the Nottingham Post, which I still do. So I started that in 2002. And then that gave me the confidence that when Retro Gamer started, I sent, and I mean sent, like literal physical copies of stuff I'd written in the paper and in fanzines to Martin Carroll, the first editor.
Yeah.
And he told me since that what actually slightly stuck out is that I was a bit old school and had sent him clippings. God, how can we? I might have sent him tablets of stone, right? But anyway, he was really impressed by that, and he gave me a gig. So there you go.
Awesome. It's interesting you're talking about. I mean, I had a kind of similar. I was, I always wanted an Atari 2600. I actually thought it was £100, but yeah, I think you might be right. It was £199.
Well, it depends what you. Yeah, it was 199. So I can tell you that because it's in the Argos catalogue, and we all know that the Argos catalogue was what defined Christmas, right? So you might have been looking at the K's catalogues in the underwear department.
K's,
right?
Yeah, it was.
I was looking at the consoles.
Yeah, it was women's underwear section, and then you turn to the back to look for your toys. I
say I want that on a T-shirt. That is a fantastic point, mate. Well done.
That catalogue could have quite literally been 3 pages, and I'd have been quite happy. But I mean,
stick together, Al. We know. Continue.
But I mean, like yourself, I wanted an Atari 2600. I never got one, so I had to make do with. I don't know if you can see them. I've got all these little I call them LED. I know is it VFD or something. All these little handheld games that I used to kind of fawn over when I used to go to John Menzies. And then I got a Binatone 2600, Binatone, the bright orange one.
The Pong machine. They're great.
Yeah. Or as Billy Connolly said, orange. It was like mega orange, that kind of burnt kind of orange colour. And then that was it. I kind of lost interest, and for a good number of years, I kind of didn't have any interest in video games. And then until I got a Texas TI 19948, and then I got a C64.
That's quite unusual that you would get that. That was not necessarily a common computer. Very good version of Space Invaders, I would like to point out.
And Donkey Kong.
Yeah. Did it make you feel a bit different though, Al? The fact that you had a machine that other people had not got, because it was a social standing kind of thing, wasn't there?
At that point, see, people talk about the play school wars. I'd left school. I was working. I was a grown man by the time I got my first.
If you were in the playground, that there would have been another issue, wasn't there, Al? Let's be clear about this. Bearded Al in the playground, that's not right.
I was found not guilty. It was never proven, mate, so we'll not go into that. But and I, like yourself, I then went, I had a kind of hiatus for about, I don't know, 90, 91 to maybe 92. I didn't have, I was getting married, and my ex at the time she had money. I think she had like £1,500 saved up. This was 1990, and I didn't have any money saved up.
Is this why you were marrying her? Is this why you were marrying her?
I was marrying her for her money, mate.
You wanted the money for that Atari 2600.
It was a lot. That was a lot of money back then. But I was.
You take this woman for her money and her console. Is that what your vows were?
It was actually, yeah. But Anyway, so I kind of got the guilt trip, and I thought I better sell this Commodore Amiga. So I sold it, and that was it. And I was like computerless for about 2-3 years. I think I got a Game Boy when it first came out, and that was all I had. And then I was on Yak Yak, which is Jeff Minter, Lamasoft. Yeah. Were you ever on Yak Yak?
I wasn't really on the internet, my friend.
Really? Yeah.
I was writing for papers, mate. Old school.
Yeah.
But no, I wasn't on that. So
yeah. So I was on that.
Your love, that rekindled your love then.
It was. Well, the first thing when I first got the internet, it was 1997. I was living in Moan at that point, and I had the thing plugged into the thing, and it's like Yahoo, right? What do I do now? And I'm like, Commodore 64, and it was like,
that was it. Sorry. So your first ever search on the internet was not porn.
I think
it was for Commodore 64.
It was Commodore 64.
Well done you. Well done you.
There you go. And before I knew it, I was on Lamasoft, and it was great. Suddenly I had gone from like not thinking about computers to being in this environment where we were all talking about the nuances of Manic Miner and talking about the colours of sprites. It's like I've found my home after all this time.
I want to ask you, is the thing you'd missed, was it actually playing the games, or was it the community and the conversation around?
I think it was more the community aspect, just talking about it. But at that point, I still didn't really have. Well, I had a PC. The Commodore 64 was something that was 20 years ago, and I had no way of ever playing it. And then I discovered emulators, and I thought, this is great. And then about a couple of years after being on Yak Yak, somebody, I think his name was Xerox or something, he put a post up saying, free computers to good homes. I went in, and this guy
had me at free, right? Yeah. Okay. Right.
And
yeah.
It was, we're talking about, what would it be, maybe 2003, 2004. And this guy had a massive collection of old computers, and he says, anybody want them? And making that statement now seems ridiculous, considering you've got to spend hundreds of pounds on these things. Back in 2005, nobody was wanting these.
Yeah,
nobody was interested.
Yeah.
I actually put a Commodore. Yeah.
There was that weird thing that you just said, that in the late 90s, you thought the Commodore 64 was ancient history, and I would totally agree with you, right? But that would be, it was still, you're still having commercial games released for it, only about 8 years before you've just said it seemed ancient. Yep. So now, there's something about how we aged, is that now we're like, like The Last of Us, which, what a great game. Oh, Christ, that's like 11 years old. And you're like, oh, right, hang on. That's it. So yes, it's a strange phenomenon which is connected to our aging, isn't it?
I mean, I've got people who work in my team at work, and they were born after the PlayStation came out. You know what I mean?
Well, that's not allowed. You don't work with those people. Because that reminds you of your mortality. So you need to get away from that, Al. Toxic.
So anyway, this guy had all these computers, and he had like 3 BBCs, 2 BBC Masters. Blah, blah, blah. So I said, "Oh, could I get a?" I think it was like, what did I get? I got a BBC Master, I got a VIC 20, and I think I got a Dragon 32. So I got the kind of
as the song goes, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Right.
But then they arrived, and I suddenly thought, holy shit, I've not seen these things for at that point, it seemed like 20 odd years. And I thought, wait a minute, I wonder if you could still get a Commodore 64. I went on to Google, Commodore 64, full collection, disc drive, £19.99. I'll have that, buy it now. And then suddenly this whole world opened, a bit like you finding your Atari 2600 or VCS, as we called it in the UK. And suddenly you realise, well, man, we can now own all our things that we couldn't afford as a kid.
Do you think? Do you think it's actually possible to buy a childhood now? Because I think that's what people are chasing. They associate this thing that if I own that thing, or if I own a thing that I wanted to own, this will somehow recreate the feeling that I have of a happy time in my life. And doesn't always work like that, does it, Al? Doesn't always work like that.
But that's exactly why. I mean, I've got all these machines up there. These are all the ones that my mum and dad would refuse to buy me, and now you can. Well, I'm saying you can get them for a tenner, but.
So now you do it to spite your parents. Is that what do you invite them round? Do you invite them and say, look at that, look at that. That could be my childhood, but you ruined it. Right?
They both passed away, mate.
Are you just saying that? Are you just saying that to make you feel even worse? Because that's what you should do. That's what you should do. Right?
If they turned up for tea, I would be calling on a bloody exorcist. But anyway,
Oh, you're good humoured, Al. Okay. Have you lost any other people close to you that I can allude to? No, stop it. Right.
Yeah, I was going to tell you, I better not, because I don't know who's going to be watching this. But
oh my God, it's gone from a video gaming podcast to an exploration into your psyche. We can do that.
You can make it whatever you want it to be, mate.
Right.
But so anyway, so you got in touch with Retro Gamer. Did you write for? I'm going to offend some people.
Please do. Are you dropping the C-bomb? What are you going to do?
No. I subscribed to Retro Gamer from issue 1, and I got to about issue 200, and then I used to keep them in a cupboard, and I realised I hadn't read the last 2 years worth. I think the problem for me is they've obviously moved on to. I don't look at the PlayStation 2 as nostalgic. I've not got any nostalgia for it, so it's now more recent. But I happen to. Martin Carroll wrote the first iteration of Retro Gamer.
Did I write for that?
I enjoyed them better. I don't know what it was.
There you go. You better have him on the show and not Darren.
Yeah.
I'll be a big fight. I did write from issue 5. So I did write for while Martin Carroll was the editor up until 18 when it went bust. And then I've written for Darren ever since. Yeah. I mean, it was publishing is quite precarious anyway. But yeah, live publishing was a pretty small setup, went bust. But luckily back then, what they call Imagine back then, I think it was Imagine. They bought it, and then now Future own it. So I've written for both lots, and can I just be clear? Martin and Darren both absolutely lovely men. Okay, let's just make clear. I'm not taking sides at all. Okay.
No, I think it's fantastic that exists, because I mean I've watched YouTube videos like Australian YouTubers, etc., and they buy Retro Gamer. I don't think there's another magazine like it in the world. You know?
I went to the Strong Museum, which is in upstate New York, the Museum of Play, and they've got this huge collection of old computer. I mean, colossal, not like an individual. Oh, you've got a lot in your attic. I mean, like warehouses full, and it's a fantastic museum. And they took us in the archives, and I felt quite touched because, along with things like they'd got original material like design documents from Atari, so you could see sketches of Missile Command or Tempest that Dave Toyer had written on. Along this, they had every single issue of Retro Gamer, and I went, "What's that doing it?" And he said, "Oh no, that's a really important part of our collection." He said, "Often people come to our archive and they ask to look at that." So I felt really proud because, you know, I'd written like for everyone since issue 5. So I was, that was nice. So thank you, Al. And I'm even going to forgive you that you got to 200. That was a nice round figure. You're forgiven.
So obviously you got involved in like the various live computer events. How did that kind of come about?
Well, I was asked, and I'm gobby. I imagine those are the two things that came together there. My proper job is I was a teacher, and then I've always worked with kids with learning difficulties or adults with learning difficulties. And for the last 16 years, I've been a university lecturer. So I am used to talking. I'm used to standing up in front of a room and shouting. Clearly projecting my voice and getting people's attention. So I think that's probably why I was asked to host some back in I think the first one's in the noughties, probably at the Retro Ball. To Play Expo, I used to do quite a lot at Play Expo for Andy Brown. It's a nice lad.
How did you enjoy it? How did you enjoy the kind of live interaction with a live audience?
I was getting very nervous before, but as soon as you're on stage, then it all dissipates, doesn't it? So I think there's all right, because I've been fortunate enough over the last 20 years, it will be 20 years that I've written for Retro Gamer, is that I've talked to loads of people that have made the games that both of us and people listening to this show, you know, were really important, and we really loved them. You know, they were something that was important to us in our lives and all that. And so meeting the people and talking to the people seems a bit magical, particularly when they never seem very arrogant about it. I just think if I was interviewing old pop stars, I've got this vague, not that I have, but I've got this vague idea that they would still have a sense of that they were famous and they were important, and no wonder you're interested in me, no wonder you're fawning over me. Whereas all the people of, you know, that literally hundreds and hundreds now of people that I've interviewed, they're all humble and nice and also always surprised that you're so interested. And also I'm stuck because normally they say, I can't remember anything. That's a comment. I won't be like, it's 20, won't remember anything, right? And then because you do your research, which I always do. And so when you start asking them, it starts coming back to them. And often it seems a bit like a therapy session for them, that they go, oh yeah, I remember that. And you realize you're asking them sometimes something that took them, if they were writing a Commodore 64 game in the 80s, someone like Tony Crowther, who I've interviewed a few times, is that, you know, he'd write a game in about 3 weeks. It was staggeringly quick. And so you're asking someone to reflect on something that was work. Let's just remember,
Yeah,
they were not.
yeah.
It wasn't like, you know, they weren't art for art's sake. They were making commercial products that they had to, you know, deliver on a deadline and they had to sell. And you're asking them about, now, why did you put that pixel on level 2, right, just above that? But amazingly, if you prompt them enough, they quite often go, "Oh yeah, no, I remember now. Yeah. It's because that jump wouldn't have been possible otherwise." Right, nice one. So, and I don't know about you, but I love minutiae like that.
Yeah. No, I know. It's interesting you're talking about what you call it, guys forgetting. One of the guys that I was desperate to get, and I quite literally just go into LinkedIn and Facebook and type it in, and I'll send a friend request. I had Sean Southern. He's been on my channel a few times, and
He's a good man.
half of the games that he wrote, he doesn't have any recollection of them.
Yeah.
And
sometimes you have to show them. I've had to send pictures. No, I never wrote that, and I'm like, mate, I've got it here in front of me. No. Right, I'll take a screenshot with your name on, and only then they believe you.
And I'd asked Sean, I said, so have you played like Lotus Turbo Challenge recently? And I've not played that for like 20 years. And at the end of the interview, I says, listen, I'll zip up all your games. I'll put the emulators on and I'll put it on my Google Drive. And you can download, and I even gave him instructions on how to load the games. It's like utter insane. Absolutely
That's so
insane.
sweet. You're providing a service to elderly coders everywhere, Al.
Well, I had Andy Walker, who has written, he wrote one of my favourite games. Super Pipeline 2 is up there in my top 10 video games of all time. I messaged him a couple of weeks ago. Hi, Andy. So you fancy coming on for a join me on a live waffle? Oh, that would be fantastic. Just let me know. Blah, blah, blah. He's a lovely guy. He's just really sweet guy, you know. And it's, as you say, you're asking these guys about something that they did 30 years ago. It'd be a bit like somebody asking me, do you remember that Excel spreadsheet that you put together?
Yeah.
Nope.
Strangely enough, no. But Andy's a really interesting man because as he will be honest, he's a bit older than us. He got into the game quite late, right? And so when I first got in touch with him to ask him if I could interview him, he said, are you a member of the NUJ, the National Union of Journalists, right? To which I laughed because so many people that write about video games, you know, we haven't got qualifications in journalism, which just made me, actually, I think Martin Carroll has. Martin, if you listen to this, big up. But I found that such old school. And then when I sort of said, well, no, but this is some of the stuff I've written before, he was fine. And I went up to his local pub in Bridlington. And where the officers of TASET, hey mate, if you ever want to go on a little pilgrimage, the streets at Bridlington, you go into the pub where they, used to drink at half time at their work breaks, and you can see where their officers were, where TASET, where Super Pipeline and Super Pipeline 2 were written. So you should go there, mate.
Brilliant. He did tell me a story which I thought was fascinating. That he, I can't even remember the name of the computer. Oh, it was an Apricot, I think it was. And he wrote an arcade game called Andromeda, which apparently doesn't exist anymore. It's not in MAME or anything. And what he did was he actually built an arcade cabinet and he put it into the pub. And then he got a phone call, a bit like Pong got a phone call the day later to say it's not working. Yeah. And it was because it was full of money.
Yeah, I mean, I love those stories. They're just great. And it's interesting that he was interested in the hardware. There's very few Brits that actually made arcade games. Very good at home games. I asked him once, I said, isn't that weird, that British coders have made loads of home computers, but not arcade games? There's a very few. The Century was in Manchester, and he still, and he just said, we're not businessmen. He said, we're creative, but we're not businessmen. So that's why, you need infrastructure. You need your Ataris or your Nintendos. You need, businesses to actually create a big machine, an arcade cabinet, whereas someone in the bedroom, you can knock out a game that can sell on a tape and you're away, which of course that's what I ended up doing very well. You are right.
Yeah, yeah. So obviously you've now got into the Ted Dabney Experience podcast, which is, it's
I have.
fantastic. For anyone that's not listened to it, there will be a link down below. Can you just
Oh,
talk
thank
talk
you.
us talk me a wee bit, or talk me through what is the purpose of the Ted Dabney Experience? What do you kind of aim to achieve?
I think it's, well, I suppose we like to be entertaining and informative. That makes it sound very poncy. I think the biggest thing is that we were trying to shed light. The reason it's called the Ted Dabney Experience, I think you've had Tony on, so I won't labour this point, is that Ted Dabney was the other half of the person of the Atari founders. Nolan Bushnell's the one everyone knows. Ted Dabney's the one that less people know. And so it was just this idea that there is some unsung heroes in this in the video game business that we would like to shed some light on. Now, that doesn't mean to say that we don't shed light on the what should we say, the leading cast. So the stars. So on the show we have had people. We've had Ed Larg, who did Asteroids and Centipede, Eugene Jarvis, who I know is one of your favourite designers, Defender and Robotron. So we've done that, but we've also tried to have people on the show that you people won't have heard of. So that's the kind of idea. And sometimes not people that directly make the game. So like I loved an episode we did with a woman called Evelyn Seto, who worked on kind of the graphic design of Atari. In fact, she actually did the Atari logo. I mean, once it was designed by her boss, George Opperman, the Fuji logo, as it's known, is that she was literally the one who was kind of drawing it and painting it. And it was really lovely to get people that people won't have heard of, alongside the names that they will have heard of.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the last one. I can't remember his name. Do forgive me.
Jeff Bell? Was that right?
He was literally the first guy in and the last guy out, wasn't he? He quite literally put the lights out before he locked
it. Yeah, I know. I just love that. Yeah, and that's not even like metaphorical. That is literally like he was shat. Is there anyone in? No, right, door gone. So I really love that. And I mean, again, you see these. I'm really interested in arcade games, and they're machines. They had to be manufactured. It wasn't just the code, it was the design of the cabinet, the design of the control, the electronics inside. So I'm a big fan of the early arcade industry. And that's really, our podcast just focuses on that kind of so-called golden era.
I had Tony he did one of these things recently, and he sort of said that he loves how geeky the whole thing is, that you ask Eugene Jarvis, so why did you choose to make like the top of the main Robotron character orange?
Tell us.
Am I right in thinking it was going to be blue? Can you tell me why you changed your mind?
Yeah. But he can. I mean, he's amazing. He could have done. That show was it was so long.
You had to cut him off
into two opposite. Yeah. He was like, when we got to like, well, thanks, Eugene. We've been here for like 2.5 hours. Like, what is that? It? Okay. What? So he was great. Very generous with his time. That man.
Yeah, because if I remember rightly, you had to split it into 2 podcasts because
too long
to run on
upload.
for so long.
You've rambled when it makes 2 episodes, which we're probably doing here quite successfully, Al.
So Tony did say that he was part of the Ted Dabney Experience because he's got the whole knowledge of the video game industry, and he's also really good at a certain missile command. Richard's obviously
Is he? He doesn't like to talk about it. He doesn't like to mention it.
He told me that. And he said that Richard was invited on because he's got a fantastic collection, but he couldn't remember why you became part of it.
I think it's my good looks. I think that's probably it. I imagine it's because I've got a black book that is the envy. He wrote that on my Walter Day trading card. Oh yeah, I've got a Walter Day trading card. I'm important. And he wrote on the back, he's got a black book of contacts that's the envy of retro journalists. I'm not quite eloquent how he puts it. But yeah, I think the thing I bring to that is that I've talked to a lot of these people. So we're not cold calling.
Yeah.
We're not cold.
Do you see when you're recording it?
Mm-hmm.
You'll maybe talk for the first half an hour, then Richard will have a shot, and then do you record yours separately, or are you all sitting collectively with your headphones on?
Actually, no, we all live in the same house like the monkeys, and that's how we do. That's what I'm saying with Retro Game, right? Next door, Darren and Nick, and we all live. I sometimes go there and write about it. No, we just do it from our front rooms via a thing like we're doing this on. But yeah, well, it's so what's interesting is that we do it live, but then it's edited. Now people might go, what do you mean by that? Is that we do try and let it flow a lot, so that people, because often they, whilst we're asking often specific questions about how they made a game in the 70s and early 80s, but they want to tell you about, the how their marriage split up. That's happened. How their marriage split up around that and the pressures they'd got at home. And I'm like, well, that's part of the story. you carry on, right?
Yeah, I suppose the sign of it, and I'm still learning the trade, but I suppose a sign of a good kind of interviewer is just to kind of prompt them a wee bit and then just kind of sit back and let them talk. Whereas in the early days, I was interrupting constantly, and I was like,
you interrupting, a quiet, retiring man like you. Can I say, I don't know if you've ever read any Clive James, but his autobiography, he says a brilliant thing about interviewing. He said the most important thing with interviewing is listening to what they say. So, for example, if you're interviewing someone and says, how are your school days? And so, they went very well until I killed the headmaster. Your next question is not, so what did you study at university? Right? You should go, tell me about that. And we do prep. Me and Tony do the prep, and Richie does all the fantastic audio work. But me and Tony prep, and we do prep, detailed preparation. But that shouldn't then stop you going, whoa. So what was about that? You were doing a prototype for a game that never came out. Tell us more about that. So you should always listen, I suppose. There you go.
Yeah.
Top tips from Clive James.
Yeah, I suppose it is. I mean, I'm still learning the trade. I mean, I'm not patching you, but I have, however, I have been asked to. I've done. Is it two? I've done 2 play Blackpools, and the piece de resistance was when I got to sit with what's his name, John Romero, and I'm sitting there thinking,
what a nice guy.
Look at John Romero sitting at right on shoulder. You know what I mean? And I noticed
his hair really is that luxuriant, isn't it? When you're close up, you want to touch it. We're envious. Yes, I've interviewed him as well, like you.
He's a lovely guy. He's a lovely guy, and like you, I like to kind of throw in a few contentious kind of questions, because he was talking about, we were just singing his praises. I says, oh, Doom is fantastic. Doom 2, oh, brilliant. Hexen, what a game. What the fuck happened to Dakatania? What was it all about?
You've got to throw that one. Which is, I thought his responses were quite good. Like he never, that whole marketing thing about, John Romero wants to make you his bitch. That's marketing. That wasn't him. So he's a good lad.
Yeah. So you've never interviewed David Crane? I mean, all the guys in the Ted Dabney, they've all been related. Did you?
I've interviewed David. Oh, you mean?
No, sorry, not in the Ted Dabney.
I've done it. I've done him. Yeah. I interviewed David Crane in Florida with the Kitchen brothers as well, Gary and Dan.
Oh, Gary Kitchen.
He's a legend. David Crane, but very generous and quite quiet. He's also fucking huge. It's like a mountain. That one, yeah, right. It's like him and Kevin Toms, right? Don't get in between them, mate, right? Don't sit behind them, right? At any kind of cinema, right? They're huge. There you go, top tip.
Aptly named David Crane, obviously.
Well, see what you did there. Yeah,
I know, that was a good segue. Yeah. So, see the Ted Dabney. I mean, how difficult is it to get these guys? Because with all due respect, some of these guys are probably in their 80s, if not older.
Yeah, 70s or 80s. Because we focus on the arcade industry in the 70s and 80s, and we sometimes drift a bit into the 90s, particularly if someone's carried on making games. Well, I mean, the main way is because I have interviewed a lot of them, and also Tony, through his blog, has talked to many of them, particularly around the kind of manufacturing side. I tend to talk to people because they're the game designers or the coders. So that's a nice mix as well. But no, it's mainly because I've interviewed them before. But you definitely get some kudos if you can contact someone cold, but you say, I have interviewed your mate, then it makes a huge difference. So Al, as you just said, you're working on your craft, is that, the more you do, like doing this is on Spotify, isn't it? Or it's whatever.
No, it's YouTube. Oh no, I don't know. It's going to
You don't even know where it's going, mate.
I have no idea. It's going to be on YouTube, but it's going to be on the popular podcast things, whatever that is. I don't know. I don't understand.
Podcasts, okay, right, yeah.
I don't understand the podcast. But, yeah.
So anyway, is that, you know, people get to know you. And the thing is, Al, is that, you know, people do like talking about themselves, as I'm doing here, and to be fair, you're doing as well. So actually, it's not as if you're asking them to do something that's desperately unpleasant. Although occasionally, very occasionally, that is hard. I mean, I have had the pleasure, but sometimes the pain of interviewing Matthew Smith. And, you know, he's one of those names that everyone remembers, even if they weren't really involved or interested in computers, they've heard of that. And, you know, he didn't have a great time back then. And so sometimes it's really hard. You're thinking, why am I doing, you know, he's agreed to it. Like, you know, we're on stage in Manchester, and then you're like going,
yeah,
am I putting him through something? As though, you know, but then he comes off stage and he's like, yay, everyone's buying him Guinness and hugging him and everything's great, you know. So I know, there you go.
Yeah, I did have that. I wanted to ask about Matthew Smith. So, I mean, how difficult was it to get a grip of him, because he's kind of out the scene, isn't he?
Right. So the first time I'd met him was in 2004. He'd come to speak at an event down in London. I think it's a Classic Game Expo. I can't remember what it was called. It only ran for 2 years. A guy called Chris Millard ran it, and he was speaking, and that was a bit like, you know, like John Lennon coming back from the dead. You know, like, what? Matthew Smith? Are you joking me? Right. So I remember, you know, going down there. It's the first time I met Martin Carroll actually as well.
Martin's a great guy.
Even though I'd written for, like, I think at that stage about 4 or 5 issues. It was that summer of 2004. And so Matthew, I remember this really just like, oh my God, he's here, right? And it's him over there, because he's still, you could tell it was him. So anyway, so I'm not joking, right? So he's got a room full of people, like, you know, waiting, and he walks on, right? He stands up, and the first thing he says, now I've dried up. Right, that was his opening gambit. I've dried up, right? And there's just an awkward pause. And like, I don't know, some said, well, should we have some questions then? Right, and then, you know, there's a room full of like, so, and then he answered. But so anyway, after that, he's just, I'm standing with him, and he's over there. I'm standing with Martin. I said, I'll go and ask him if we'll do an interview. So, and Martin, I remember, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, was a bit starstruck. Most people are. But I was a bit kind of, when am I going to get the chance to do this again? So just walked on and said, hello, I would love to come and interview. I write for Retro Gaming Magazine. There's the editor over there looking a bit shy. Okay. Can I come to Liverpool? He went, yeah. All right, brilliant. Okay, so I got the train to Liverpool, and back then I just had like an old school recording, one of those tiny little tapes, right? So
yeah.
So he met me off the train in Liverpool, and so I took him round. I said, "Oh, let's go to some bars," and he took me to some. He said, "I'll take you to some of the pubs I used to drink in when I was writing Manic Miner and Jet Set Willie." I was like, "Oh, this is perfect. This is perfect. I could interview him in the very places. Oh, this is perfect." Right. What wasn't perfect is that he clearly hung out in very loud, heavy metal pubs consistently. So in one pub, honestly, I love Ace of Spades, but when I've heard it 5 times, right, and I have to keep stopping the tape recorder trying to ask him about, so what was this Mega Tree project? I'm like, this is doing my head in, right? So, but what was kind of sweet is that we had a whole time, so this would be 2004. And as we go into these old places, right, he said, oh, that's changed. And I went, oh, when did you last come here? 85, 86. And I went, whoa, what? Right, you know. So he lives in, I won't tell you exactly where he lives, but he doesn't live in the central of Liverpool. And like, so he had not been, it wasn't a regular thing in coming to Liverpool at all. And that's kind of continued. I mean, sometimes people say, oh, can you put me in touch with Matthew Smith? And I'm like, right, here's the deal, right? If you really want to see or talk to Matthew Smith, you have to knock on his door. That's the bit, you know, he doesn't really answer emails. He won't answer the phone. You knock on his door. And of course, it's a bit in your face. I've done it a few times. I've written letters. I send him a Christmas card every year. Once I sent him a Christmas card, said, I haven't heard you for 2 years. So I put £5 so we could put credit on his phone. And he did ring me back in February. But even so, that was still nice. So yeah, and he's a lovely man. And again, there's something about those games he made, and there's something about the mystery of him as well. You know, and people just want the best for him. So do I. You just kind of want things to be all right with him. It shows how much people connected, not just with the games, but with him.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I mean, I watched the video. It might have been the one that you're talking about. He stood up and he was quite clearly a bag of nerves. And I was quite shocked about his appearance. He's probably had kind of gone through a rough time. Am I right in thinking I heard it on somewhere that he never actually made any money at all out of Jet Set Willy? He never got a penny.
Jet Set Willy didn't, because that was produced when he was at Software Projects.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, he would have taken a wage. Sometimes a bit sketchy about that, right? But I mean, certainly, I mean, I don't know the ins and outs. Well, I must probably know a bit of the ins and outs of what he's told me. But his business partner, Tommy Barton and Alan Mayton, I don't know. I mean, he was probably a difficult person to work with at times, but I think they took advantage of him being young and possibly a tiny bit naive. So that's kind of true in the way that he did get royalties for Styx. His first game, he got £3,000, which is 1982 into 83. That's a decent whack. For Manic Miner, when he was at Bugbear, he said he got 30,000, which is bloody colossal. You buy a house with that easily, by two. But then, so after the Jet Set Willy thing, because that was through Software Projects, so him saying that he didn't make any money out of it, he was a partner in that business, but I mean, I think he certainly felt that he certainly didn't he didn't get anything like the royalties he'd got when he'd produced a game for another company.
We can't, before we crack on with the actual main topic, we can't not mention this guy, Ian Gray. What is your fascination with Ian Gray?
Right, can I tell you now? Right, stop, because I will revisit that at the end, right? Okay,
right.
So hold that thought, my friend.
Yeah. Right, listen, we're going to get into the meat and bones of this podcast. You know the premise. The easiest way to describe it: you're on a desert island. You're allowed to take 3 video games. It can be anything. It can be a PlayStation 5 game. It can be an online game. All the technology is there. You take 3 games with you, and these are the only 3 games you will ever be able to play ever again. In no particular order, I would like you to give me game number 3, or game number 1, I should say.
No particular order, and then you're telling me game number 3. Okay, so first I'd just like to establish something. Al, you're a bastard. 3 games in the entire history of video games. You're giving me 3. Can I just say that is a cruel and unusual punishment? But I have taken this seriously. So I have picked 1 coin-op, 1 console, and 1 computer game. Okay, right. Not only that, is that I've also taken it seriously that it's games that I think I would play. Not just these are my favorite games. The thing.
Yeah.
Right. So coin-op first. So I mulled a lot. So I was thinking, what would be useful on a desert island? So I thought about taking Dancing Stage. I really love that game. I'm quite good at it. I can do 5 feet, so that kind of keep me fit. And possibly I did mull over Puzzle Bobble. I love that game, especially playing with my wife. And you said that you can somehow, you got the technology to play it. So if play, it would be, I would miss my wife a lot. So playing Puzzle Bobble with Nikki would keep me sane on the desert island. Especially because if we're in different places, that when, I wouldn't hear her swearing at me as much either. So that'd be good. But I've chosen the one I'd like to take, please, is Jump Bug. Jump Bug is from 1981 from Rockola. Now, is this, first of all, you're umming because it's not the most obvious.
I know the one. You look like a VW. It's like a.
Yeah.
Oh, is it not a car? Yeah, it's a Volkswagen, and you're looking down, and then I think you had like the what was the other one with the fire engine? That was the same kind of technology with a big steering wheel, and you look down in it.
No, you see, you're right. You know what you're doing, right? You're thinking of Superbug, which was written by Howie Dellman, now known as Wendy Smith. This is the kind of minutiae you get from me. But Jump Bug is a little bit later. It's a scrolling one. You are right that you are a little VW, but you kind of bounce along. It scrolls. You bounce along and you collect things on buildings. I love it. If you obviously you can get it on MAME. Is that the buildings? They have the words hotel and things like that. So it's like they're using words to suggest this majestic landscape. It is an amazing game. For 1981, it's staggering how much variety it's got. And if anyone who's listened to this and played it will go, yeah, there's this wonderful bouncing mechanic. You get to the third stage and you go into a pyramid. And I would argue, and when I've said this before, no one's corrected me, that actually it's the first scrolling platformer, because suddenly you go into this pyramid and you can scroll all in 4 directions. And it's just amazing. Then there's a level after that where you go underwater and they just make everything sort of go slow as if you're underwater. And I've often had dreams that I'm in that level, that everything's moving very, very slowly. Jump Bug and on a desert island is that I think I would get a lot better at it. I would love to hold a high score on any classic arcade game, and that would be the one that's possibly doable if that's all I've got to do all day. So Jump Bug for me, and if people haven't played it, I urge you to play it. It is gorgeous.
I will put up a screenshot. The only problem is you can't see it because it's a podcast, so you're screwed.
Well done, mate. Brilliant planning there, mate. Well done.
I'm looking at it right now. So yeah, it's kind of, it's got similar graphics to what was the one of the first video games where, is it type Canyon Bomber, where the thing just goes from left to right and it gets lower and lower and lower.
Yeah, but of course it's a few years later, so it's got colour and all that.
Yeah.
But I am fascinated. Yeah. I'm also chuffed because my mate John Shapaniak, who's got lots of contacts in Japan, we've managed to find out, mainly him, him has managed to find out who wrote it. So I've got a bit of a dream of finally getting to interview the person and maybe even going to Japan and meet him. That would be just wonderful. To meet the guy behind Jump Bug would make me so happy.
Awesome. So is it on a level base thing? It kind of looks a bit like Scramble, but with a Volkswagen, doesn't it? Does it scroll?
You're right. It just stop trying to take it apart, Al. Just accept it's a beautiful game that you haven't heard of, right? And when you get to discover it, you'll see why I love it so much.
I always make a point.
Your daughter Nina even did me a little painting of the flyer, which I've still got. She made like kids for like Christmas, they do your little like painted tiles. She did me one for Jump Bug, and it's a treasured possession.
Bless. So when did you discover this game? Was this one that you played in your local chip shop?
Yes.
Or?
Yeah.
Really?
In the local. Yeah. It was actually, I come from Ripley in Derbyshire, and it's amazing, trying to explain to people that arcade games were everywhere, and they're like, "Oh, in arcades." You're like, "Yeah, we had an arcade," but it was like leisure centres was a big place you would go to, swimming pools or cafes. This one was actually in an arcade, which was upstairs. If there's any Ripley people listening to this, then it was above where Chasers used to be. And then that changed to Victor's. I think I'm getting too much Ripley information in here. But yeah, I played it back in the day. And I remember in that arcade, they had a high score competition every week that if you got the high score, you would get, I can't remember, maybe £5. So it was, and I remember coming second. And I've never, because when it was announced, when it, like the week before was Astro, I was like, I'm not going to be winning that. And then when it was announced, it was Jump Bug, I've got a chance. I remember coming second. And just being so upset. So maybe that's me. Maybe on this desert island I could exercise some demons that from my Ripley arcade days.
Yeah. It's always interesting when people are doing this podcast thing. A lot of the time they don't necessarily pick. There's probably much better games that they would rather take to a desert island, but a lot of them they always pick at least one which scratches a nostalgia bug, no pun intended. Yeah. But it's interesting we're talking about nostalgia, and this game, you've picked that game because that was the game that you played.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, it's a brilliant game. It's not just nostalgia. I'm telling you, son, right? It's not just nostalgia. That game is really clever. There's loads of hidden things in it. There's it's this bounce mechanic. You'll see, and and you can shoot as well. Always fun. Yeah, but here's what I'm going. To it.
Here's what I'm going to do. I do a Main Meister 10-minute mashup. I will do a Jump Bug dedicated to you, and I will give you my thought.
Thank you.
Anyway, yeah, that's game number one. What would game number two be?
Right, so this is my console one. Okay. Now, I'm taking your direction seriously, that these are games that you would want to play on a desert island. So, I mean, with console games, I really love narrative games. Heavy Rain is one of my favorite games. Anything by David Cage, I really like. But I would not play them again. In fact, with Heavy Rain, I made a point like that's when I got to the end, I was so moved. I felt like I'd been through something. It's like, I'm never playing that again. Like I've made my choices and I've got to live with them, right? So I had to think of a game that hadn't got a narrative in. Right, so I'm going to take Pilot Wings on the Super Nintendo. I love that part. I mean, again, I think it stands up as a fantastic game and one that you can definitely get better at, and I could definitely get better at. But basically, it's because it's got, I would say, possibly my single favorite gaming moment in, which I will tell you. In 1994, it was the World Cup, and Spain were in the World Cup, and again, I was still in Ripley then, and we had some Spanish people staying with us, and it just happened. So it was like, it's oh God, you're in the World Cup. And if I remember 1994, I don't think we were. Yeah, we've not got through to the World Cup. Just like, let's support the Spaniards, and they would come around to us. And we had a Super Nintendo, and we played that game, and people would get good on each little bit. Someone would be really good at the hang glider. I was pretty good at the paraglider. Someone else would be good at the biplane. Right. And we started getting better and better. And if you played that game, at the end of each level, you get this sort of quite harsh instructor who sort of got who sort of tells you what you've done. Right, you can't pass. Go back and do that again. Right. Anyway, we once put in like the perfect performance. I think we got like 100% or whatever. I don't think, was it out of 100 each? But anyway, we put in the perfect performance, right? And at the end of that, the screen comes on. I don't know if anyone's done it, and he's crying. He's like crying with joy that you've absolutely, the instructor is, and we all had a bit of a moment. We all sort of looked at each other like, it's like what we've done has made a virtual mustached and finally that's what we've done here, right? And it was just amazing. And then if you get to the end of that game, is that it goes all weird again. I don't know how, is that you finish the final level, and then you have like a military sections, like and then it's a bit odd, right? It doesn't, if you played that, it's like that feels a bit incongruous. And then it comes back and the screen goes black, and it goes Pilot Wings, is it expert or something, and the screen's like black, and it's like we just felt like we'd gone to the other side. So I love that game. It's one of those games that you could play again and again and just get it a little bit better each time. So, you could hit when you're doing the paraglide or going through the rings, you could just get it just perfect. You can just get the perfect run on the jetpack. I just think there's so much to do. And I do like that version. The N64 version, I like that version best. So I definitely take that.
Yeah, I actually got in an argument with somebody fairly recently. I mentioned Pilot Wings, and somebody said, "Yeah, it was just a technical demo in this SNES." And which I think.
So I presume you're never talking to them again, because after you'd hit them, and then you're not talking to them again. Right? Yeah.
But I mean, my experience of Pilot Wings was watching Games Master, and they started showing games in the SNES, and the guy jumping at the parachute, it was mind blowing. I'm like, look at the graphics, and I absolutely craved a SNES for a couple of years until I had enough money. I went up to was it Radio Shack? I think they used to call it. It's now called Kenny Maplin's Radio Shack. It was like electronic place. I went in there, and I would be what age would I be? I'd be about 25. And the guy goes, "Oh, can I help you, sir?" I says, I was too embarrassed to go in and buy a video game. So I says, it's my nephew. He's looking for one of these Nintendo Mega Drive things.
So
like Sonic the Hedgehog or something.
You were pretending to stumble over your words.
I was being deliberately vague. And I says, "Have you got that? It's a Nintendo, please, Sonic the Hedgehog or something?" And he went, No, that's a different thing, sir. I'd already gone in and Kenny.
That was your cover story. Can I want to say, why were you embarrassed? Was that on because I suppose, to be fair, gaming only allegedly became okay for adults in the 90s. So all right, still a straight.
I mean, my embarrassment with games started in 1985 when I had a big thing for Antoinette and accounts. Oh. And I was in the accounts and I was looking at, I sat down with Antoinette to look at some journal, whatever it was. And Bill, who, I mean, I would be, 20? Bill was an estimator. He was about 40. And he came into accounts as I was talking to the lovely Antoinette. And he went, oh, and I've got this C90 for you. It's got Manic Minor, and I'm like, oh my God.
Don't tell me. Are you telling me that was not a leg opener for the lovely Antoinette? Right? That was it. Oh, if it was only not for that C90, I would be balls deep right now in Antoinette. Is that what you told yourself, mate? Is that it?
Well, actually, I did. She did agree to a date, and I got stupidly drunk. But then she dumped me because I was too shy to kiss her. So that was the end of that. That was the end of it.
We've gone deep here. We've gone deep here. Okay.
We have. And ironically, Antoinette is on my Facebook.
I hope
she's not aged well. That's all I can say.
Antoinette, if you're listening to this, call him. Right, okay. He wants to get past the coal store in Manic Minor and thinks you might be able to help him. So yeah, good luck, Al.
We had a works night out a couple of years ago, and Antoinette appeared, and I'm like, fucking hell, age hasn't been very kind to her, bloody hell, but still a lovely person. But what are we talking about? I can't remember what the hell we're talking about.
On the island. We're still on the island, right? I think we're
so. Yeah, Pilot Wings. I saw it in Games Master, and it was insane. I did eventually get I got my SNES, and I thought it was a fantastic game. I never did complete it, but brilliant game. You know, it's still, even now, and I'm with you. And even the same with Super Mario Kart, it's got to be the SNES versus every time. The other ones.
I like how in this I have listened to a couple of these in preparation, and I like how you sort of give your tacit approval when people have picked a game, right? So I take it I've got the thumbs up from Al.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And hopefully you'll get the thumbs up with Jump Bug once I've had a look at it.
You definitely, or else you'll be getting the thumbs down. So, okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm quite confident that you're going to give me the thumbs up on the last one as well. I seem quite confident. Should I do that one?
Go for it. Yep. Game number 3.
Okay, so this is one from a computer. And again, I listened to your rules because I was very tempted to take basically any of the Scott Adams text adventures. On the VIC-20 is what I played, which is how I first played, because there's something about, again, I can still remember so many of those scenes that, you know, the dumbwaiter and the count and all that. It's just beautiful, but not very good once you've solved them. So I will take, and if you read Retro Gamer, you perhaps won't be surprised to know that I would take Sheep in Space, which is my favorite ever game. It's beautiful. It does involve some nostalgia. So with all of these things is that, you know, Jeff Minter is, you know, one of my heroes. As you well know, I know he's one of yours as well, is that, you know, it was a hero that you could meet, you know, when you went to a show back in, you know, 83 and 84 and 85, he'd be on the stand with his mom and his dad. So, you know, you could meet him. You really felt like you were following the way that you might follow a favorite band. Like, you know, like, oh, have they got a new single out? Or have they got an album? Be said, has Jeff got a new game out? And I still remember going to the show where they did Sheep in Space. And that was, I think actually there's a picture of that in the new, is it out yet? The kind of the Llamasoft story. There's a picture of the show that I was at where Sheep in Space, it must be 84, is the game that was kind of, it was pushing on that. And I just remember that. And it's like, wow, you know, it's a bit of our history as well as Jeff's history. I love that game. It's funny because I've quite early, I think it was about issue 40 or so for Retro Gamers, that I got to interview Jeff in a pub in Oxford called the Port Mahon. I think it was that. So I think you might have even been. You probably just dissed me because you were on the Yak Yak forums and everyone knew you and I wasn't. So you were the popular kid. But anyway, I got to interview him and Giles, you know, Ivan, who's his partner, and over a few Guinnesses. And I really remember thinking, if I never wrote another article now, if the magazine, heaven forbid, folded then, which again, it had already folded once, so it was like that was not an impossibility. It's like I've interviewed Jeff about my favorite game. I can die happy now. I haven't died, and I'm very happy that I haven't. But that was special for me. And it's again a game that I would get better at. There's a beautiful rhythm to it, and I like what Jeff does so well. He takes a classic arcade game that's tried and tested, the gameplay solid, but adds his own unique thing. And with that, it's the gravity. It's just brilliant idea that as you go up and down, your proximity from the planet, either the planet above you or the planet below you, changes not only your speed but the trajectory of your bullets. So there's this brilliant thing if you're chasing you chase one, like, I'm going to get him, but it's like, oh, you've just got to judge it, because you make your bonios of doom, you make your bullet sort of just bend, and there's an absolutely beautiful moment if you manage to go right from across the screen and it just hits it, and you're like, it's because of this curve. It's not like in Defender, a great game where you're like, right, I'm on the right level, I've shot it, great, move on. But this is like, it's like just that one shot, you've just got the angle just right. And I love it. Such a great game.
Only Jeff could write a game like that, where you have to ensure that your bovine has got sufficient grass in its belly.
Oh yeah, and even has a bit of fun, because he also taught you new words. He likes playing with words, doesn't he? As you're playing, it sort of goes like replete, famished. I had this thing where I used to play that every Christmas Eve with my mate Pete Cummins, who lives in Australia now, because it was. So again, you're right that even games that I would stand up, that all those three games are great, right? Is that they're also associated with powerful memories, and that is my my best mate from growing up, Pete Cummins. So he might even listen to this, so he will know how special Sheep in Space is to me and to him and to our friendship. There you go.
Yeah, and of course I had was it James Lisney done the music? That was one of Jeff's pals.
Well, Sheep may safely graze, which is he's an erudite chap, is Jeff. He is. He's a good lad.
Well, I've been quite literally chasing. I mean, I've met Jeff. I've met him a couple of times. Most recently last year at the Zap Live. And at that point, I said to him, Jeff, you'll need to come on my channel. Yeah. Thinking he'll never reply to my emails. And so I went on to Yak Yak just before him. I was doing the 12-hour live stream, which you guys took part in. And quite literally the day before it, Giles says, "Oh yeah, tell me what is it about? Where do we have to be?" I says, "Here's the link." I says, "Just come in about 8 o'clock." And I thought they're not going to turn up. And I had John Hare on, and then I thought, "Fucking hell, Jeff's in." I'm like, "Right, anyway, John, thank you very much. You're going to have to wrap that up."
Yeah, you're out here, mate. You might have wrote a sensible soccer, mate, but I can get you any week. On your way. Hello, Jeff.
Yeah, and it was, I don't mind admitting that was a dream come true. I mean, I think out of any of these guys that have been involved in this industry, he's a gamer first and foremost. He's ridiculously shy. He's a lovely guy. And he just,
don't you think it's wonderful after all these years, he's finally sort of getting the credit for carrying on, sometimes plodding on, as he would say, in the difficult days, like in the sort of early 90s when, and then in the noughties when he was trying to do stuff on the iPhone. He just kept going. Yeah. And now I think he is getting the credit in this beautiful collection that he's got. I had the privilege of interviewing him for Edge's like 300th edition. And it's just like, I think now he's getting the recognition that he so richly deserves.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Did you interview him for Edge, you said?
Yeah, for issue 3, and I occasionally write for Edge, their collected works and stuff. But I used to do making ofs years ago, like including one that I was always very proud of, about E.T. I was really proud of that because that was before everyone now knows that story. But back when I wrote that in 2006, is that people didn't know that whole story. People ironically did say like, "Oh, didn't that get buried in the desert?" And then when I interviewed Howard Scott Warshaw, was like, "That never happened," right? And then there's this one of them like, "Oh, actually, it sort of did," right? So Anyway, so I do write for Edge.
Just on a complete sideline. You're talking about getting buried in the desert. As we know, it wasn't.
Have you buried someone in the desert? What's going on? Is this where you confess? Right? It's not Antoinette, is it? Right? What's?
Damn it!
Yeah. This is how a real crime podcast starts. Right? Yeah. Go on. What in the desert?
The ET cartridges, amongst other stuff. Was it about 3-4 years ago, or maybe more than that? It's funny when you talk about, oh, it was 3-4 years ago. No, you're actually forgetting the 3 years that we lost during the COVID. It was actually 10 years ago. And I went to a talk through in Glasgow about 10 years ago, and it was the guy that was in charge of the digging up the games.
Really?
That was fast. I got my picture taken with him as well. That was fascinating.
Brilliant.
But yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, is there sheep in space? I mean, all of Jeff's games are quirky, to say the least. Have you got a second favourite? Is there a particular reason you like that one? I mean, Iridis Alpha is, I can't play it because it's bloody hard. But
I've got a soft spot for Hover Bother because it's so different from its others. And Revenge of the Mutant Camels, which I don't think has aged as well. But I remember at the time just thinking all those levels and each one, there's some bonkers thing. I would also like to say that, his most recent games, that's what's lovely. He's not just living on nostalgia. He's recent. And also Ivan, his coding and life partner, is that he's now been part of Larmasoft for about half of its life. And people need to give him credit. He does amazing work making the engines, as Jeff says. He makes the horse and I get to ride it, right? Makes horse is the right word, but anyway, is that so? I mean, they are a real team. So I thought Polybius, I can't really pronounce that. I thought that was great, and TXK, particularly on the Vita, I think is great. So what's nice is that you're not just looking at can you remember when? It's like I'm excited what his next game will be. If I actually know what his next game that's going to be. So he's revisiting something from the Atari Vault, but we are not allowed to say. But I'm very excited to see it. Yeah.
Actually, my next guest that's going to be I'm going to be talking to him on Sunday is Jamie Hampshire, Juno 6. He was one of the guys that wrote one of the tracks for TXK, and Jamie actually won an award for that track. He did. Have you ever played on the Atari 2600? Sorry, VCS. What's it called? The Evil Stepfather on the 2600. It's a game.
Evil Stepfather. Are you making this up?
It's not. It's a game that Jamie wrote about 10 years ago. And it's kind of similar.
It's a homebrew one. Okay, right.
You start off, you've basically murdered your kids, and you're in the basement of a building, and the water level is rising, and you've got to try and escape. You're the evil stepfather.
This is increasingly becoming like a true crime podcast. But you've buried bodies in the desert. Now there's the kids in the basement. No, I must say that I'm delighted that homebrew games exist, but I don't tend to play them. I'm very glad we covered them in Retro Gamer, but no, I haven't played that one. It sounds bonkers.
It's worthwhile checking it out. But anyway, listen, time is of the essence. I know you've got to get going. You're not going to get away lightly. We're going to, if it's possible, we're going to bring the tone down somewhat. This is the nasty part. This is where I ask you to pick. Come on, Matt, it's technically not nasty because you're getting a chance to eradicate these games from history. This is actually the nice part. We've had the nasty part. What 3 games, for whatever reason, it was shite, it was overly priced, it wasn't good, it's just a horrible game, or in some cases, I even had a guy that picked Doom. Can't remember who it was. He picked Doom because that started the online gaming, which he doesn't like. So
I see.
What 3 games?
Okay, so first of all, I found this a lot harder because I can never understand why people hate any kind of media. It's like you don't play it, don't watch it, don't listen to it. So those people that hate something, I can understand why people love something, but I find it very hard to relate to people that get upset about another work of, I'm going to use the word work of art, sounds a bit poncy, but another creative work. It's just like, just don't play, don't interact with it, right? Don't buy that CD, don't watch that tape, don't play that game. So I found this difficult. So what I've done is I picked 3 that represent like an emotion around gaming. So the first one I'd like to pick is Super Monkey Ball Adventures, because it represents when you're disappointed with a game. I love Super Monkey Ball. I think, I mean, that was in the early noughties, wasn't it? I think 2003
GameCube.
or 4.
I got that in GameCube.
It was one of the, it's when I just started writing for the Nottingham Post. And I absolutely love that game. It's one of those, it fulfilled all the things that classic arcade games did. I mean, it was originally an arcade game, but I think most of us played it on home consoles. Yeah.
Really?
And in fact, they even had a banana. The controller was even a banana. Why not? So anyway, it seemed to fulfill that easy to learn, difficult to master, that old, statement that Nolan Bushnell said the game should be. And for people then that were kind of snobby about like, oh, all old games are shit, it's just the graphics, right? Sorry, other way around, sorry. All new games, oh, they're not got the gameplay. It's like, this hasn't it, right? Absolutely beautiful. Love that game. And then, so when this was coming out on the PS2, I was like, oh, I can't believe it. And I was reviewing games then, so I asked to get, a code so I could review it. And when it came, I was so excited. Oh, it wasn't a code, actually. It was literally the disc. They used to send them in the post. I've got a box full upstairs of promo discs. And so I was so excited. Put it in, it's like, what the fuck have they done? It's like, you've hurt my child, right? What have you done? Right? And it was just the way that, it was just that I was expecting perhaps more of what I'd loved, or maybe a different twist. And it just seemed to be making pointless, go fetch kind of things with loads of interminable dialogue, when the whole point of Super Monkey Ball is that it's immediate and you've just managed to get in. If you fall off, start again, try again. It seems to take away all the joyous things. And in fact, even as almost as piss you off, is that there was some puzzle levels so that they would be just like, Super Monkey Ball had been. So it's almost like this is what you could have had, but instead we're going to make you do pointless collecting tasks, pointless errand running in the main game, just so occasionally you'll get to play one of those. So disappointing. I'm sure we've all had games that aren't necessarily terrible, but that have profoundly disappointed us, and that was one for me.
So Super Monkey Ball, that was the original, and for anyone that doesn't know what that game is, you're in a ball, you're controlling a ball. Think Marble Madness, but the joystick,
that's not a bad analogy,
whatever direction you move it in is the direction the ball moves, and the screen. Yeah.
The idea is that you're tipping the clever things, like you're tipping the floor. That's the idea.
Yeah.
You're tipping the floor, and then your ball will roll. So it's got that. So you've got to get the inertia right. I'm sure anyone listening to this will have played it. Super Monkey Ball, yes. Super Monkey Ball Adventures, no.
So was that the second one? Because I'm sure, was there not a Monkey Ball 2?
Yeah, they're all great. It's just fine, this one is when they put the mechanic. What I did notice, because I thought, was it as bad as I remember? So before when you asked me to come on the show, and I was thinking about this, I thought I better look at it. I've still got a GameCube, I couldn't be arsed. Sorry, not a GameCube, because this was on the PlayStation 2 as well. I think I played it on. Is that I looked at a video thinking, was it as bad as I thought? But what I think it probably was, is that what surprised me is that it was by Traveller's Tales, who went on to do, they did the Lego games, didn't they? They went on to do fantastic stuff only a few years later. So there you go.
Yeah, it's when they take a simple idea for a game, which is fantastic, and they insist on just kind of embellishing it and padding it out with completely unwanted features.
Yes.
As you say, not a bad game, but it was no arguments in that one. Game number 2 from.
Okay, so this one's more obscure. Okay, so game number 2, I am picking a game on the Commodore 64, so you might know it, called Caesar the Cat. Now, the reason I'm picking this game is because it's regret and with a little bit of self-loathing. Okay, so this is why I'm picking this, is that Caesar the Cat is quite early in the Commodore 64's life. And I bought the original, which had a very fancy big box. And also I'd seen what the graphics were like. I looked on the back and it actually had screenshots. We all know that back in the early days, sometimes it's like artist's impression of the game. And you're like, I'm not going to be fooled. It's not looking like that, I'll tell you now. But this was screenshots and it looked really beautiful and looked really interesting as well. Right? So, and I remember it was $9.99, a considerable amount of pocket money, I would like to point out. And when you actually play it, it is very boring. Now, interestingly, it does still look quite good. Again, for 1983 standards. But the cat who kind of jumps from level to level, and so you have to catch mice and you knock things off the shelves. Anyway, but it's very boring. And as I was playing it, I was like, you idiot. Not only do you regret like dropping $9.99, but like you have been suckered here because you looked at pretty pictures and thought it would make a good game. And the reason I particularly want to say that is that people often go, yeah, back in the old days, we weren't bothered about the graphics. It was just all about the gameplay. Bollocks. We've always been graphic whores. We've always been interested in what things look like. We're always excited. Have you seen what it looks like? So there's nothing new about people salivating about a PS5 game, right? Look at the eyelashes, right? And somebody going, yeah, it's about the gameplay, and you're like, right, you're both wrong. Okay, right? Because this is a medium that both those things are important, and when they come together, it's great. But this for me, and I tried to learn from that and just be a little bit not the kind of don't judge a book by its cover, but just like try not to be just suckered in with what something looks like, but similarly don't be snobby, because visual appeal is part of the joy of video games.
I do remember the game. I've never played it. It was released by Commodore themselves, wasn't it?
I thought it was Mirrorsoft, wasn't it?
Oh, I
think that's right. I've not even researched that one because I didn't really want to go back.
I think you're right, actually. As soon as you said that, Caesar the cat.
On the magic internet, I think, yeah. But the way I say, if you see it moving, the way the cat sort of leaps up a shelf is actually quite impressive. It's just
Mirrorsoft
itself. Yeah. So it's
I'm
apparently there's an interesting story. I think it was produced by some Czech people, because obviously Mirrorsoft, there's a Maxwell link there, the famous bouncing check. Is that I bet there's a good story there. In fact, the more I think about it, perhaps I should try and find out and get in touch with the people that developed it. Probably an article in it.
There it's, hang on a second. There it's there, yeah. Caesar the cat, yeah.
That's it, yeah.
I do remember. I mean, what the hell is going on there? So are you? It looks
you kind of walk along the shelves and you can kind of jump up and down. But can you imagine looking at that in 83 on the back? It was like, wow, this looks amazing. There's loads of graphics. The cat looks amazing. Oh, this looks really weird. Right now, I'm getting into it. Yeah, it's not all that, as the phrase goes.
So is that, see the picture? I mean, I know it's obviously the viewers can't see it. The cat looks like mega HD. Was that like a hand-drawn? That was an after
mega HD.
Yeah.
Honestly, when you see it running, if you go on a video, is that when the cat sort of lollops along, is that the word? Is that what cats do? Is that it's quite impressive again for 1983. So yeah, can I just say at the moment, Al is now doing his research. There we go. Yeah, look at this. Excellent research. He's definitely not going on any left-handed websites. He's genuinely looking at Caesar the cat. Now,
what the hell is that mouse doing at the top? Oh, he's just being
I think you have to get them. I think you catch the mice, but in catching the mice, you need to be careful not to knock things off. They're supposed to be shelves, so you've got big sort of like teapots and. But it's kind of interesting. But you play it for like, even in 1983, I'd play it for 5 minutes and go, I've made an awful mistake.
I have to say though, the sprite for the cat looks bloody good.
What we just said, Al? What have we just said? We should not be suckered in by things looking good. Have you learnt nothing from my rant?
So, how long did you play it? Was it one of these games you literally played it for?
I think I desperately tried to take it back. I'm pretty sure I tried to. There's something wrong with the tape. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm sure we all tried that. I think the tape, but can I swap it for? But no, I'm pretty sure that failed, and I just learned my lesson though. I learned my lesson.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that fairly recently. You buy a TV and you can't get the contrast properly. As long as you keep your receipt, you can take it back and they'll give you store credit. You can take back a pair of trousers or a pair of shoes, whatever. You never thought about taking. If you went back to a computer shop and says,
now the thing is, Al, is when you took your trousers back to Burton's, right? What you hadn't done is copied that pair of trousers. So you'd already got a pair of trousers and you were taking these trousers back because you didn't need these trousers anymore, Al. Can you see why computer games were different They were different, weren't they, Al? Different. And I think the shopkeepers worked that out quite quickly.
Yeah. Well, my probably moment of shame with the piracy thing was we had a local computer shop. They sold Atari and Commodore 64 games, and I bought a Ranarama by Hewson for Atari ST, and I thought it was great. And I tried to copy it, and it wouldn't copy. So I carefully peeled off the label, put it back, took it back to shop, and says, "Oh, it's not working." And the guy's like looking at it, went, put it in, it came up, read there or whatever. And he looked at me and he went, "You know that I know that you've copied this. I'm going to let it go, but you didn't bother coming back again." I'm like, fuck.
Was that? Oh, that again. That's we're really getting into your childhood, Al. It's amazing you're such a well-rounded human being with all this trauma.
I actually might not publish this podcast now that I think about it. We'll see. We'll see.
Well, wait till we get to the last game. Okay.
So, Caesar the Cat, yeah. Why is that getting the game of shame?
Because of the regret of being suckered into a pretty picture and the self-loathing of wasting my money, I suppose, on it. So there you go. But I learned.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Game number 3.
Okay, so my final one, and please don't see this as trolling, because again, there is a reason why I picked this, is that this one represents how dangerous it can sometimes be to revisit your childhood. So I am picking China Miner for ruining nostalgia for me. Now, China Miner was a Commodore 64 game by Interceptor Micros by Ian Gray. So we will get to talk about Ian. It was, I think it's 83, pretty early anyway. And I remember that game really fondly, right? I really, it was, I remember the music, I remember the big sprites, and, obviously it was a rip-off of Manic Miner to some extent. I remember it really fondly. Then in the sort of late 90s, when I was getting back into, and hopefully going to, I think sort of 99, when I was going to hopefully maybe start writing for fanzines, and is that I loaded it up. So the first thing, it took me 15 minutes. I still got my Commodore 64. So it took 15 minutes, right? Then I played that game for at least half an hour with my mate, Paul, who then transitioned to Faye. That's another story. Not during. In fact, it took so long for the game to load. He actually transitioned while we were waiting for the game to load. Yeah. Well done. That was it. Yeah. Anyway, is that we could not get past the first enemy. And at first we're like, we're just a bit out of practice, right? It took us to just jump over the first enemy, right? And I was like, you're nodding, I think, because you've had this pain as well. So it was part, and it's like, I remember this game being fantastic. And now it's just like, I think it's poorly designed. I think that any game that's clearly not been play tested, because most games back then weren't, they were played by the person that wrote them, maybe, their son, right, or their dad, according to who was writing the game, right? And it shows, and it just shows in so many things that we take for granted now, that something's not going to crash, that there's some sense of like a learning curve, right? This was the first, trying to jump over the first enemy was impossible. So it's just reminding me that sometimes revisiting something that you remember as a beautiful part of your childhood, you can ruin it. Sometimes things are best left in the past, much like those bodies and those regrets. Al, leave them in the past, mate.
Yeah. So what level did you manage to get to back in the day?
I thought I'd got quite far into it. I'm now doubting my sanity. So I remember that game. I think it flicks, so it shows you what's coming. I think it's one of those, right? So I thought I'd seen quite a lot. I'm now thinking, I thought I saw quite a lot, because it would flick. Because at this rate, right? Okay, I've spent half an hour, and finally we managed to jump over the first enemy and then died at the second one. I'm like, I can't believe. Right. So yeah, can I just say that Ian Gray, who wrote that game, is, again, he is the one of, I've been very fortunate writing about old video games for 22 odd years now. And he is the one person I would still love to interview before it's, dare I say this, before it's too late. because I have a feeling he's well into his retirement. I would imagine he's in his 70s. We had a bit of a lead, or you got a lead, didn't you? That he contacted you, and I even wrote, I wrote a letter, old school. Never heard anything back, and I don't think you heard anything back either.
It was interesting. Now, my memory of China Minor was it came on a. Well, I was tarnished at a very young age with Ian
Well,
Gray.
we've established that. We've established how problematic.
When I bought my Commodore 64, an interest-free credit from Woolco in 1983, I got that. I was paying up £15 a month. I bought the C64 and I bought Frogger 64 by Andrew Chalice, Interceptor Software, and also Crazy Kong by Ian Gray. And my mum said, right, you can, Coronation Street's finished, you can plug your computer in, and I loaded up what do you call it, Crazy Kong, and my heart just sunk. Even being the very first computer game I played at home, it was just a complete pile of shite. It is wrong. I know we're going off topic. It's wrong in so many ways. It's a clone of Donkey Kong. The hammer that you pick up will last for anywhere between 90 seconds and half a second. It'll just switch off randomly. Yeah, you can go up the ladder. So that was that. Anyway, fast forward a couple of years. I bought with the famine in Ethiopia, obviously the software industry did their bit. They brought out Soft Aid. China Minor was on that, and I thought, well, I'll give it a go. It looks quite nice. Loaded it up. Oh, I love the music. Tried to play it. Couldn't get past the first baddie. Switched it off. Promptly forgot all about it. Fast forward about 20 odd years, maybe, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. I was doing one of my live streams or whatever it was I was doing, and I tried to play China Minor, and people thought it was hilarious how bad I was at it. So it then became a thing. It was the last game that I played if you look at any live streams I did in the last 5 years, the thumbnail is always me playing China Minor because it was always the last game I played. And even
I was trolling you a bit with this one.
And even, I mean, where did I start with it? You use the joystick to control it. You press the fire button. It still
makes you angry.
It does. I do get angry. You use the joystick to move it. You press the fire button. In fact, no, that's not technically true. To jump, do you press the fire button? Yes, you do. But you've got to press it up as well.
See, what's that about?
With fire.
Right, what else is it doing? Right,
And even to start the game, you get the music. You press the fire button. It doesn't start. You've got the joystick in your hand. I've got to press spacebar. And if you don't instantly react, you're dead. So you go like that. Oh, bastard. Because you've got to, the minute you start walking, the minute the game starts, you've got to be holding the joystick left, or else you die. So you've got to
I think this just shows this was the time. This is the time where there was no concept of game testing. So when people eulogize about the old days, just people used to make crazy games in their bedrooms. You're like, yeah, and many of them were unplayable. I once interviewed Steve Pickford of the Pickford Brothers, and he said they'd be making specky games and other 8-bit games he is. And then they started working for Nintendo, and he said, Nintendo said to us, okay, so first, right, everyone's got to be able to complete your game. And they're like, what? What, even idiots? What do you mean? As long as we can do it, that's all right. And then they said, and they can have no bugs in it. We're like, whoa, what are you living in? Okay, he said, we make specky games. We're like, just keep making it harder till it crashes. Right? That's the end of the game. That's the end of the game, right? Okay. And but he said, and that is, of course, the right way to make games. And tested and tested and that David Doker did GoldenEye. He said again, Nintendo, they will test the fuck out of a game, right? And that's what you should do. You should test it and test it and test it. And you need people that haven't made the game to test it. So it's like proofreading. Right? If you made the game, you kind of know what you meant, right? If you haven't, then you come into it fresh. So that is what I would love to meet Ian Gray. I will not be opening with saying, I've got a Scottish mate who's livid with you, right? And that's not how I'm going to open. But I know that he lives in Evesham, which is not too far away from where I am in Nottingham. So I might one day just get in the car and I've got a few leads and just hang around. Because he wrote, as you well know, he went on to write Siren City, which, to be fair, that hasn't aged so well. It's just the concept. You play it and you go, oh my God, this is like the first Grand Theft Auto, right?
I've said that as well.
Some other ones, it's like Tales of the Arabian Nights is great. That is difficult, but not impossible. That's really clever. Things like Aquanaut and stuff where you've got this huge scrolling area. There's some really, in fact, Interceptor Micro as a whole did some really interesting stuff. You know, again, British quirkiness, which, as you say, I think we are both representations of British quirkiness, aren't we, Al?
But so China Minor, I mean, it was, I started playing it, and when I managed to complete the first level, everybody in the live stream was like, oh yeah, beauty, he's done. I'm like, oh fucking hell. And then I kept playing it for about 4 years, and I could fire it up now and get to probably level 7 now.
But I'm impressed. Is this because I think there's like 30 levels, but I'm now thinking, is there? Do you think but he's like, no one's going to get past like level 9 at the moment. Yep. So it's probably you get to level 9, it's like, whoa. But hang on, you were showing us those pictures of those other skins. Yeah, I never coded them. It's probably like it's a sham. It's an Ian Gray, you shyster, right? Yeah, that I'll open with, right?
But if I was appearing in this podcast 10 years ago, I'd probably picked China Minor. I actually like the game now. I've learned the nuances of it. It's memory muscle. It's knowing there's bits where you'll jump and you'll not even hit the stalactites at the top, but you die. It's got the worst sprite detection ever. But it's getting to know. There was one bit and was at level 2 where this thing's moving along and there's a laser fire, and I must have played it for about 3-4 weeks, couldn't get past it, and then I just sat and watched it one day, and I did it. I went, yeah, dancer, and then I knew exactly where to do it, and now I can do it. So I actually like the game, but yeah, I would bet all my money on anybody who's never played it, saying, I bet you £1 million. Well, I've not got £1 million, but I bet you £1 million.
It's like an indecent proposal. Steady. Right,
you will not. I would bet against anybody playing that for the first time and getting past level 1.
Yeah, I think that should be a chat. Yeah, you see, people have got to be honest. They can't like, oh, I've never played it before. Right. So yeah, I agree with you. I think you should change your name to China Minor Meister. I think that, please do it just for that. That would be great. Oh, that was fun.
Before we finish up, the interesting anecdote with China Minor, I was playing it week on, week out, and then this person appeared, and he would just come in and go, play China Minor. And then somebody would say, no, he's playing Spectrum games, mate. Play China, and he would type in play China Minor, capital letters. And I would say, sorry, mate, I'm not playing it. It's not a request time. I'm playing Namco arcade games. Play China, and he kept coming in week on week.
Is it? Was it Ian Gray? Maybe it was Ian Gray. Right?
Well, that's the thing. He started giving me money. He would do a super chat, £10, play China Minor. And then I would
some guy with a very weird sexual preference.
I have no idea. But this guy appeared, and he for about 3-4 weeks, he in one stream alone, he gave me £10. He says, play China Minor. And I says, listen, mate, I says, I'm playing Spectrum platform games. I'm not going to play China Minor, but you've given me £10. I think it's only right and proper that I play it. So at the end of it, I played it. And then people were saying, oh, you've sold yourself. You're now pandering to people who are giving you money. And this in the next week, the guy gave me £5, play China Minor. I says, look, stop giving me money. I'm not playing it. 5 minutes later, another £5. He gave me £30 in one video. And do you know this? I ended up banning him. And I says, look, I don't know who you are. Stop giving me money.
So
please stop it.
And isn't it hard when random men give you money to play China Minor? I bet when you were growing up, you didn't think, I'm going to get to a time in my life where strangers ask me to do stuff for money. They're probably working on their muscle memory as well, Al.
And I do take credit I mean, I don't know if you've ever, the Pico 8. The Pico 8 is a virtual console.
yes.
Somebody has converted China Miner to that. And my mate Nick Sherman, who's Arlasoft, he did a China Miner Christmas special. You need to play it. It's China Miner. He's written it from the ground up. It's China Miner, except it's got snow. So as the snow falls, it starts to rise up. It's wonderful. When you jump, it's a bit like Miner 2049er. When you jump, you can kind of go, whoa, so you can jump and then you can kind of go back.
Right,
so he's made it playable. He's made it playable. But anyway, I can't remember how it came about. This guy, I think it says, are you Ian Gray? Yeah. And I says, listen, if you're Ian Gray, I would like to talk to you. Can you give me your email address? And he gave me, it was something like,
I know, you shared it.
It was something like Ian Gray at, it wasn't even like,
we shouldn't say should.
Yeah,
but you gave it me. We tried, didn't we? Yeah.
It wasn't even Ian Gray at gmail.com. It was something like Ian Gray at blah, blah, blah,
I think it was real. Yeah.
And I thought, that guy's real. So I emailed him and I says, look, I'd love for you to come. I'd love to get you on my channel. I loved your games, etc. And he said, yeah, I'll do that. He was quite kind of, and he said, look, I don't want you to talk about money, etc., etc. And then I got back in touch with him and I never heard any more. But I think that was him. But I do find it very, very.
When I knock on his door, right, and say, oi, you're the one that did China Miner, right? I will, you'll be the first to know. I will be straight on the blower. I'll get us on the phone. This is the guy, Al. This is the guy, the bane of your life. So,
he wants his 200 quid back.
Steady, yeah. So,
but
anyway, yes. Oh, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that would be such a lovely thing if we finally got Ian Gray to talk about his past. There you go. That's my New Year's resolution there. Right there, mate.
Fantastic. Right, just to summarise, so your games that you would pick would be Pilot Wings, because Pilot Wings,
Jump Bug,
Cheap in Space, and your games of
Super
Shame,
Monkey Ball Adventures, Seize the Cat, and the legendary China Miner.
Listen, mate, it's been an absolute blast. Sorry for taking up too much of your time. I did say to you we would be done in an hour. It's almost,
anyone would think that we rambled on about things, wouldn't it, if they didn't know us?
Listen, mate, thanks for your time. I look forward to catching up with you again.
Can I just say,
next time?
I'm normally on the other side of a podcast. This is only the second time I've kind of been interviewed at length like this. The other one was on the Retro Hour. I know you've had Dan on as well.
Oh, so yeah.
It's a funny experience, and it's made me think about, when I interview people as well. But anyway, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you for deflowering me. You did it beautifully. Thank you, Al. All the best, mate.
Thanks, buddy. Take care, and thanks for listening, folks. Till next time. See you later.
Bye.